Dr. Tori Olds, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Howie.
I am so excited for this conversation. I'm even more excited because we rescheduled. And so I've had more time to learn and think and understand this approach to helping people grow and heal and develop that it reminds me about like the metaphor I've been using is I've been trying my hardest to learn how to do pull-ups and to practice pull-ups. And it's like you came along and said, well, why don't you just try levitating? And I'm like,
that's
well,
good.
Wait, is that a thing? I did not think that was a thing. And then you're like, no, you can levitate. Here's some books, here's some demonstrations, and here's an explanation of the physics. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like excited. I'm really skeptical. And I'm also like rueful, like, I wish I'd known about this.
Yeah.
So to put it in context, it's what we're going to be talking about is I think a way of helping people create transformation that is transformational and not slow, incremental, and like a Maginot Line of slogging back and forth.
Right.
So with that introduction, I'd love for you to just sort of introduce yourself to my audience and who you are and how you got here.
Well, my name is Dr. Tori Olds. I was raised by two psychologists. They were a little bit more analytically focused, although my mom ended up doing very present-oriented experiential work. And so I grew up with a lot of curiosity, just my personality also to be I'm introverted and interested in the inner world. So I grew up with a lot of curiosity about the mind. I also was an artist, I did songwriting and dance. And when I went to grad school, however, there wasn't a lot of experiential focus yet. In fact, there's still to this day, I don't think is a lot of experiential focus.
Well, can I ask, what does that mean? When you say an experiential focus, either versus an analytical focus, like I'm not quite sure.
Versus everything else. So for me, experiential means present-oriented, using mindfulness in one way or the other to track the unconscious mind, or just the mind, but more than just thoughts, which I think, CBT and other approaches maybe already were doing, but really slowing down to listen internally. In fact, to be more purposeful in dropping storytelling and narrative and these are the events of my week. And this is, what I mean? Like really dropping what we already know or think in order to actually observe ourselves. And by ourself, I mean, what's moving through our experience? What impulses are we having? What emotions are coming up? What deeper knowings? Like what is the deeper, what's underneath kind of, But that takes a lot of mindful awareness that when we first started the therapy journey, psychoanalysts, CBT, all the kinds of therapy, we didn't really have mindfulness yet as an idea. So it was a huge deal when therapists began to do really in the moment, non-judgmental listening with more emphasis as well on creating safety. So interpersonal, whether that's through the relationship, like I'm right here with you, or having us be safe with ourselves, like IFS does, like making sure there's not judging parts coming in and attending to those.
Mm-hmm. And that's, so I think when you internal, IFS is internal family systems.
IFS, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, all the experiential therapies have their different ways of doing this, but they all somehow are more monitoring safety and and really guiding toward present-oriented awareness so that the deeper mind can actually be tracked live as it's happening, not talked about or analyzed, or I think this must have to do with my childhood and intellectualized about, which is very easy to do. Intellectualizing is very baked into our culture, and it's a defense that we also lean into. And so it takes actually active guidance on the part of the therapist to say, okay, but for now, let the thoughts about it soften back. And can we just be here together to notice what you're experiencing and what you do with that experience? As a feeling comes up, do you judge it? Do you reach out to it? Is there another part that comes in? Like, how does your mind play out? How does it work? And that takes a whole other kind of approach that there's many ways to do that. But any therapy that does that, I call experiential.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Is that heading in the right direction?
Yeah. I mean, you're the expert. I mean, you could say anything. I'd be like, sounds good.
Well, I have taken it sort of as my mission to understand experiential work. I've studied lots of experiential models, and I've gained from each model. But then I think the thing that I've done that's a little more unique is really step back from them all and say, okay, what do they have in common? What are the common pieces here? Maybe trying to understand a little bit more what's happening in the brain, which we might get into with memory reconsolidation, and how to integrate them, instead of just be, I'll name some. There's, the ones I've been trained in most heavily are AEDP, Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, is probably one of my core trainings. IFS, Internal Family Systems, Somatic Experiencing, Coherence Therapy. I studied a lot with a man named Stan Tatkin as well in my couples training, which is called PACT. And then just my own mindfulness, meditation practice, which is I've been doing for 20 years now. So all of that kind of is in there.
Gotcha. So I'm familiar with everything except the AEDP. But before, like this,
Yes.
I have like a 3-week head start on my audience, so I want to make sure
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But what's like, I'm putting myself in the mind of someone who's thinking, okay, well, what's the idea behind experiencing being a useful thing as opposed to figuring out, my mother did this, or I had this experience. I was talking with one of my children about an experience they had in school where I took the side of the school, and it really affected her in a profound way. And she's tracking today certain impulses based on the strength of my defending the school as opposed to her. And right. So what's in it for us to be present as opposed to just like, oh, so that's what happened.
Okay, so I think where I might start with that question, there's really kind of two things we could get into that would be interesting. One would be, what is in our unconscious mind that we're wanting to change in the first place? So maybe we can do that. That in some ways that makes sense to go there first, but you also kind of set up this other question about memory reconsolidation, which is if we're trying to change these deep imprints, like your daughter might have taken in that moment, we actually, the brain has certain requirements for that. So we'll get back to maybe second, we can look through like, what are these imprints that impact us? But if we want to change those imprints, the brain needs to first sort of activate. The easiest way is simply by becoming aware of it and tuning into it, but needs literally electricity running down the neural network that holds that learning. So if the learning for her was in a tricky situation, my people won't take my side. And therefore I better do X, Y, and Z to protect myself. There may be that kind of learning, let's say she got. So if we only intellectualize about it, then it's almost like we haven't opened that file so that the new learning can actually transform the old learning.
So it's like it's in a PDF form, right? We can read it, but
let's imagine it's a PDF. Yeah, exactly. Actually, I was just watching an interview you sent me, or you turned me on to the guy's name I'm forgetting right now, who you started a group with recently. What's his name?
Oh, Alan Parry.
Alan Parry. And he had a great metaphor that I never heard from this. And he's like, it's like when you have a PDF, not PDF, what are those spreadsheets? You have to click in the right cell in order for the information to get into that cell. You can enter information somewhere else, but then it doesn't change that original cell. You have to click on it first. I've never heard that metaphor, but I thought that was really great. I've always used the metaphor of you have to open the file. So let's say your daughter has this thing, people who are there for me, like people won't be there for me when I'm up against something hard or something. Okay. So she might have all of these corrective experiences where it doesn't turn out that way, where she has new chances to learn. Maybe people really are there for her. You're there for her. I'm sure you've been there for her a million times in other moments, right?
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily heal or land on or update the original learning and imprint that said that he's not going to be there for me. Unless when healing new experience is occurring, we're aware of the old. there's a way we have to actually activate and step into and touch into what our mind learned to believe about reality, learned to expect. That's kind of what I mean by what's held in our unconscious that we want to update. These expectations about myself, how others will respond, what can I expect out of life, how to best get my needs met, how to protect myself. Those are all very deep learnings. But if we haven't actually brought online the part of the brain, like the neural network, the memory system that holds that in place, that holds that somewhere, while having a new experience that challenges it or updates it, or we call disconfirms it, then instead of actually changing the original learning, we're just developing a new learning, a new neural network that some other part of our brain knows. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't actually change the original emotional knowing that's held in some other network. Is that too technical, or is that making sense, do you think?
Yeah, well, so this is the part that just sort of started blowing me away when I watched your IFS videos, and then I got into, like you suggested when we talked earlier, watch the one on memory reconsolidation, and I'm like, okay, so there's the levitation, because I come from a tradition in coaching where it's basically feel the fear and do it anyway. Which was confirmed by the wonderful work that I've experienced through ACT, in which Stephen Hayes famously said, like, there's no delete button, right? You can't unthink a thought. And so all of the coaching I was doing was based on, okay, so this is stuck there. And like a boulder in the river, well, the river has to learn to flow around it. And all of a sudden, here you come saying, actually, there's a way to go into the brain and change not the memory. We're not doing a Spotless Sunshine of the Eternal Mind, but
good movie, though. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
But we're changing what the memory means, so that the symptom, like that, I feel like you've got to lift weights to overcome. All of a sudden, like magically vanishes, and that's kind of what I was like. Okay, if this is real, I got to know about this, and I got to tell everybody.
It is actually pretty amazing to witness it. And I've witnessed it again and again, often through my own clinical work. And then I also train with someone named Bruce Ecker, who's sort of the pioneer of this, understanding of change in terms of looking at the brain science and its implications clinically. So let me just say the brain science one more time, because you used the word memory reconsolidation, and I don't think we had really used it yet. So until about 20 years ago, neuroscientists believed that once something was imprinted in what's called implicit memory, that it couldn't be changed. So an example would be if they, like fear conditioning would be like the perfect example. And that kind of applies to a lot of things, right? So like if a rat in the lab is taught to fear the sound of a bell, like they get a shock, you actually can't undo that linking. That is now linked in the deeper mind. Until they realize, okay, there are certain experiences that we can guide the brain through that actually can work to go into the original. I hope the image of a neural network isn't too complicated. It's just that's how memories are stored. They link things together, like the sound of a bell with the expectation of danger, and now I have to run away. Like things get linked in our brain in certain ways. That's what I mean by neural network. We can go into that neural network and actually dissolve it. It is possible to uncondition a fear response. And we actually did not know this until 20 years ago. And I don't know why it's taking until now for the word to really start spreading, because Bruce has been talking about this for 20 years, but we still have this like very set thing that like, no, once it's in the unconscious mind, you have to adapt and build up new learnings and like be disciplined and develop a new habit and do it by kind of sheer will and go against the impulse, but actually it's much more efficient and effective, if possible, to go to the original place that knows I'm not worthy, that knows that people will hurt me if I set a boundary, I'll be rejected, that knows, the only way to be loved is to be perfect, that has these deeper knowings. Those knowings can be changed, but they can't be changed until we bring them awake. Till we have electricity running down that neural network, which the easiest way to do is through becoming conscious of them.
Right. So
I can keep talking, but let me know. How's it going?
So I did. I mean, it's so pretty new research in the last couple of decades. A lot of it has been of rodent models. And as someone who's coming from health and nutrition, I've learned to distrust rodent models. Like they can point us in directions, but they're not definitive. I'm curious, like at this point, and coming from the world of nutrition, there's a zillion crazy, zany theories, flying all over the place. So there's a natural skeptic in me that says like, how much do we actually know? How much is conjecture? And how much research is actually done on human beings to say, yeah, this works for us?
Yeah, right. I think there's about 20 high quality studies on humans that have been pretty consistent. Now there is, I can email you if, I don't know if you have like a liner notes where you give resources, but to some reviews that really dig into the research. The research is strong. This is pretty well accepted now that memory reconsolidation is a thing.
Okay.
And it's been shown on humans as well. That being said, I do join you a little bit in having I hold things lightly when it comes to the brain, because we're really still learning about the brain. Like we're very new to the study of the brain. So it's changing decade by decade, even year by year. So while there's a lot of good research around memory reconsolidation, I do hold it a bit lightly, On the other hand, watching people who are working this way work, it is amazing the consistency of their results. I do every other week I meet with Bruce Ecker for 2 hours with a group of my students. And at this point, we've watched through every single one of his videos, and we're now moving into doing lots of live demos. And it is, so I'm like volunteering my friends, like, you have this issue, can you do a demo? And it's amazing, how in one session or two, sometimes even one, it's like they've been working in therapy. They're therapists. They're all therapists. They've all been in depth therapy or every kind of therapy, for 30 years. And something will unlock in a new way where they feel freed up. So I feel like I have a lot of reason to be hopeful and confident in this. I think my only caveat in it actually isn't so much that the science might not be sound, but it does sound sometimes easier to do than it actually is to do. It sounds easy in theory, but there is actually quite a bit of skill in discovering and accessing and bringing, again, that the conscious awareness to the actual schema does take a lot of skill. It sounds easy in theory, but sometimes the work learning the methods is not always that easy.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I got excited about it is that it seems to me as a novice here that the skill involved is very similar to the skill I use in coaching.
Okay, good.
So it feels like coaches, well-trained coaches do have a head start, and we just have to, first of all, understand, like, we're always told, no, you're not a therapist.
Right.
You and I talked about this very briefly. I'm like, I want to do this work. Like if I have this thing that I can give people to magically, unlock their potential, like why would I withhold it because I don't have a particular, clinical designation?
No, I mean, I love that coaches are out there really actually just going straight into like training and models or what's on the cutting edge. It is sometimes easier to be on the cutting edge when you don't have to spend all the years going through grad school, because usually what we learn in grad school isn't actually the cutting edge. So, I hear what you're saying. I think that's exciting.
So I want to kind of, like you talked about in the memory consolidation video, the main one, this idea of emotional learning, a little bit like a metaphor of riding a bicycle, like this idea of implicit emotional memory. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, implicit memory is just different than explicit memory. Let me contrast those. So in explicit memory, you're conscious that you're remembering. You have to work to remember. If I say, what did you have to eat yesterday? You draw that up purposefully and you can feel that you're remembering, if you know what I mean. Whereas implicit memory is more the things we automate. Now, those do have to stay in memory, like muscle memory would be a great example of that. So if you are, riding a bicycle, you can use you can draw on the memory of how to ride a bicycle without having to do any thinking or purposefully, managing that, right? You could be riding a bicycle and thinking about something completely different, or driving to work and thinking about something completely different. It's like, it almost doesn't feel like you're doing it. It's just automated. Now, the beauty in that is that it allows us to move through life in a much more efficient way. We don't have to like meticulously think through everything we're doing and decide how we're going to ride the bike or drive to work. It like makes things a lot easier and more fluid. But it does mean sometimes we're doing things like without questioning it. It's just there. It's like we've learned that this is just what you do. And those memory systems, again, we evolved to have them so we can just rest on them. They're not evolved to necessarily always be questioning themselves, like, is this the thing to do? Is that the thing to do? Which with riding a bike is fine, but with how to be around people, interpersonally, whether to feel your feelings or not feel your feelings, all those things that we automate based on like learning, basically, we do actually want to be able to slow down and do something else, and learn a new pathway or learn a new, with psychological stuff, it's more around an expectation, like around what's safe, what's dangerous, how to protect myself, how I should be, whether I have value. Those are deep, very important pieces that we don't want to just go with the first thing we learned and assume that's going to be great for the rest of our life. We want to be able to update those pieces. So that is what we're talking about in this conversation is like, is that possible? And if so, how? But I will say it is hard to update things we're not conscious of. So it's not enough to just be conscious of, I don't feel my feelings, or I don't let people close, or I'm perfectionistic. That's just being conscious of like the outcome of it all. The quote unquote symptom, the pattern, what the pattern looks like behaviorally. We do have to slow down and then say, okay, why? Like, what is underneath that makes it so urgently necessary? Like what learning, what did you learn about the nature of reality that keeps pumping through your not conscious mind, honestly, through your implicit memory systems that says, don't feel your feelings, don't challenge authority, don't let someone close, all these pieces, don't feel confident in yourself. That is where there's a lot of technical and, there's a lot to learn around how to then go deeper to see what's underneath in a way where you're not simply asking the intellectual mind to answer, because the intellectual mind is not where these things are mapped, and it actually doesn't know. We most often don't know why we're doing what we're doing, right? So that's where mindfulness, that's where experiential work comes in, because it's like, okay, try not to think the answer, let's go back, let's think of an example, return to that moment. Like in coherence therapy, sometimes we'll do like sentence completions, because it's almost like the unconscious mind can't help but finish the sentence. Like, I must not stand up to my boss. I must agree with my boss, because if I don't, and if you just keep saying that, 10 times, something will tumble out from your unconscious mind. It's like, because she'll hate me. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And we can begin to kind of triangulate it. It's like, we're like little detectives, like trying to really get to the source of like, how does this make sense? How is this what we call coherent? How does this make sense that you do this thing that you hate that you do? But underneath it's based on a learning that necessitates it, that explains it perfectly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that has influenced my coaching already, without really having any new skills, is the understanding of and echoing back of coherence, right? So even like coaching, we're supposed to be like, okay, you're resourced, but there still has been an assumption by the coach that, okay, that pattern is bad, we've got to fix it. Okay, you binge eat. So obviously we want to stop that because that's bad and eat it. And so there's like this whiff of judgment, and I can feel clients, like they agree with me, of course, right? Their symptom negative stance. But when I fully embraced coherence, like it totally depathologized it.
Oh, good.
It totally gave people like, oh yeah, like I'm not broken. Like it like unlocked resources, even though I didn't have a clue yet how to help them track the positive, but just assuming positive intent, just the way I guess Stan Tatkin would do in a couples therapy, or John Gottman.
Work. Yeah, like what is assuming positive intent? Wow, that makes me so happy to hear you say, because that is my favorite. I love all these concepts, and like it's very hopeful that we can change. But to me, the most inspiring, hopeful, not just hopeful, but compassionate idea in all of psychology, my favorite, most core, if we want to change the world, is the idea of coherence. So I think we're already talking about it. I just want to say it one more time in case it got lost. So coherence is the assumption that whatever we do, if the mind creates a behavior or an emotional state, maybe even something like a headache, and the mind, anything that the mind can create, when it does that, has an emotional reaction, maybe it seems like an emotional overreaction, or I'm doing a kind of pattern or behavior, I'm cutting, I'm drinking, anything we're doing, even if it seems pathological on the surface, even if it seems self-defeating, irrational, or being difficult, like that's crazy, underneath, there's a coherent explanation. There's a coherent purpose to that behavior or response. And by coherent, we mean that in coherence theory, we just say symptom. I know that's a little pathological word in itself, but that thing that we do, that we hate that we do, that symptom, like underneath, it's serving an urgent purpose. It's based on an understanding of reality that requires that symptom. Like if I learned I will be rejected unless I'm perfect, of course I'm going to have perfectionism. Or if I learned that, I have a deep learning that I, am so incompetent and I'll be filled with anxiety if I start a task. And I also have a learning that if I'm anxious, I'll turn to drinking, or I'll shut down, or I won't be able to be a present mother, or, it's like there's some framework that makes me procrastinate. And so like anything we're doing, even if it seems unhealthy, it really does make much more sense than we think. So thank you for letting me restate that, just because it got me very excited to hear you say that you were positively impacted by taking in that concept. That's a very powerful concept.
And I think I also must have had a mismatch experience around that, because this weekend I was at an ultimate Frisbee tournament of, old men like me. Everyone in my bracket was in their 50s or older. And so I have this idea, like, we should know better by now. Like, we shouldn't like fight each other and scream. And there was actually an altercation in one of our games. And I found myself like, without trying, thinking, boy, that person who is just being really belligerent, they have a really good reason in their mind for doing that. I'm like, Jesus, what's happening to me? Why aren't I running on the field chest pumping? And it's like, it just didn't make sense. It makes like, oh, tell me about what.
It's just from judgment to curiosity. It's like, oh, what does your brain know that makes it so important to do this right now?
Yeah.
It makes it the only option to do this right now. What does your brain know about that? And it's a little bit of a tragic thing for us humans that happens to be coded in a part of the brain that's unconscious. Not so much because we're repressing it, like the old idea of the unconscious, although that does happen too sometimes. That's for sure a thing. But just because of how we evolved, for efficiency's sake, we don't need to be conscious of it. So we just don't know why we're doing what we're doing. And it does take specialized training, like I was saying, safety and mindfulness and understanding of what we're going for to really get curious, allow the intellectual judgments or intellectual justifications for that matter. Like, well, I had to do that because that guy's being a jerk. All of that softens back. And we really listen for, why really did you do that? Why was that so important? What danger was being averted by it, unconsciously? You thought, it's not necessarily true, but in your deeper brain had learned, I will be in some danger. Someone I care about will be in danger if I don't have this stance. And then that curiosity goes a long way toward healing.
Yeah, because one of the things I've experienced often, I'm a little, embarrassed by it, is I'll have a coaching session with someone and I will leave the coaching session feeling really good. Like, Howie, you nailed it. And then the client feels really good, right? And they're like, oh, this was great. You're such a great coach. We figured this out. Now I have a plan. And, the plan is in this situation, I'm going to do X instead of Y. And then they come back a week later, then they've done Y instead of X. And it's crazy making. And they feel like they have failed me. And they failed themselves, and they've reinforced a story about the unchangeability of whatever is going on for them.
Or that they have some character flaw, which I don't believe that. It's not out of laziness. It's not out of not trying or not being sincere. It's just in that conversation. I love that you're aware of this now. It's like the unconscious mind just wasn't invited into the conversation. It was both of your conscious minds talking about what makes sense. without really seeing what makes sense to the unconscious mind.
Right.
And ultimately our deeper mind, subcortical, mainly subcortical, what gets imprinted there, what neural networks get set up. I think that has more power.
Yeah.
Even our conscious intentions do.
Well, one of the things I keep thinking of, especially when you were talking about like riding a bicycle as an example, is there's these videos of people who are bicycle riders who are given a bicycle to ride where the handlebars,
backwards.
Huh?
I've seen this backwards where it's switched. Go ahead.
Yeah. You turn the handlebars to the right and the front wheel turns to the left. And the first thing is how impossible it is at first. And the second thing is that at some point the brain just switches and they get it. And the third thing is then they can't go back to right. Like they're mutually exclusive. Right.
Right. That's a good point. That's such a good point, Howie, because it's like you must have really dissolved the first neural network that knew how to ride a bike in one way. If not, you could just go back to it. But you'd actually dissolved it through memory reconsolidation, probably. Go ahead. I think that's a really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess we know that the brain works this way or can work this way. I mean, I had the same thing because as a kid, I played tennis and racquetball and I was constantly getting messed up. But at a certain point, something in my brain said, okay, these are two different activities. They weren't trying to fit into the same, D3 Excel cell.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, right. Because if it was just intellectual, if we really just worked intellectually, you could get on the bike, just inform your mind. Oh, by the way, it's going to be different now. It's opposite. And then that would be enough. And you could just ride the bike. And that would be easy to do. But yes, it's a nice metaphor. It's like, even if we understand, oh no, in this case, yes, I had an abusive mom, but my new partner's not like her. If it was enough just to intellectually, just read it, but just don't do that.
But that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Right. We try to enlist, even when I'm being compassionate. In my old way of thinking, I was like trying to enlist the client. Like, look, let's figure out how to drop this stupid, unhelpful, dysfunctional thought. And I use, I use phrases like that, like dysfunctional thoughts that aren't aligned with your goals and values.
Right. Yes.
And I can see the pushback I've been creating.
That's right. I love that this is called what you just described is called being counteractive. And the way we're now talking about is called being non-counteractive. That means at no point do you suggest that what you're hearing from the deeper brain is irrational, needs to be changed, the behavior needs to be changed. You're just opening up a space for exploration of the behavior's coherence. Mm-hmm. And that is a very different, that in and of itself takes some training, especially for therapists, because we've been trained to be so counteractive. Like, that's a symptom. Let's manage the symptom. This is not a symptom management approach. It's like, oh, I'm not going to say that's bad. Or it has costs. That's fine. And we're, of course, working on this ostensibly to eventually change it. But we're not coming in with, but don't you see that's irrational? Or don't you see that has these negative consequences? Or, it's like, okay, tell me, brain, why this makes sense. Mm-hmm. What are you trying to accomplish? What did you learn? What did you experience that necessitates shame, right? That necessitates being better than others, that it necessitates or makes sense of this panic you're feeling or this insecurity. And then when we can really open that, now we can purposefully sort of like we have it online, then and only then we begin to look through and say, okay, but has it always worked out that way? Are there any exceptions to that? Because in memory reconsolidation, it's not enough just to pull online the old learning and have it activated, have electricity running through that neural network and have it really kind of awakened inside in a felt way, not in an intellectual way. Like, I know I must not trust men because my dad was abusive, but like in a felt way, like, yeah, it doesn't feel like men are trustworthy. I'm like vibrating with the truth of that, that's not enough actually. Then next to it at the same time, while that truth is vibrating inside of us, looking at evidence that counteracts that knowing in some way, I should say disconfirms, we were using the word counteracts earlier, disconfirms that knowing in some way. This is what neuroscientists call the mismatch experience. Like, I'm actively predicting that all men are dangerous while I'm reflecting on, my sweet uncle or my new partner or other, you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, they're very kind. I know they wouldn't hurt me in that way. But it's not even a push to say like this stupid old irrational thought, and can't you see that this new one's better? It's just holding them side by side without preferring one or the other. Like on the one hand, I know this, but on the other hand, I've experienced this. That creates like a moment of surprise for the brain. Like it's like error message, it's like, wait, both of these can't be true at the same time, And as soon as that prediction error is another word for it, that mismatch experience happens, then the brain says, okay, I guess my predictions aren't accurate in this case. I'll unlock the proteins that hold that prediction, that knowing, that learning in place, and be open for updating. And that's what we're going for. That's kind of the magic moment, that mismatch detection moment is like, okay. And then, so there's steps to this, it's magical in a way, but the work ahead of time, it's like hard work to set up the moment. If the moment is set up well, then it literally only takes 2 to 3 seconds for the brain to rewire, which is amazing. It's like, and then it's done, but of course we don't want to, I get excited about the magic of that along with you. But then of course, like, it's not to idealize this as an approach, because there is a lot of work to set up that moment, and there are pitfalls and places you can get stuck, etc. But that is the basic requirement. Be conscious of the old learning, bring it alive while looking at evidence that disconfirms some part of that learning, and holding them both in your awareness.
Yeah. And, a couple of things from my experience as now having, tried it 3 times is, one is the utter absence of grandiosity on my part, which I didn't even notice. It's like that song stopped. Like you notice that when a noise stops and you hadn't been noticing the noise, right? This little like, oh yeah, I love this. This is so great. Go ahead. You know what I mean? Like when the revelatory experience, like when I do good, I've done good work with clients before I discovered this, but the signature of it on their part was always this sort of sheepishness, like, right? Like that was the moment, like,
yeah.
And I can see how like little bits of grandiosity, like me being there before them, like, you got there, was actually blocking. It was withholding for the permission for them to vibrate with the truth of the necessity of the old learning.
Yes. Oh, I'm very touched to hear you say that, both like in your willingness to be open for new learning and the delight you take in the new learning.
Oh my gosh.
Rather than being defensive. Do you know what I mean? You could have gone another way, but instead you go to this like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I'm being less grandiose, and I was before, and gosh, I'm so glad to like soften that and just be present and curious and honoring that we're not crazy.
Yeah. Right. Cause I mean, I'm no different than them. I'm just,
We're really not crazy. I mean, I that's why I love this idea of getting out there, because I think it's so depathologizing, so de-shaming. We're not, Bruce Ecker says, if we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, we think we're like bad, sick, stupid, or crazy. And we're just not. Mm-hmm. We just had a learning. Now, the learning itself may be a really tragic one to have taken on and may not be serving us anymore, for sure. So the situation might have been unhealthy.
Yeah.
But our response to it makes total sense.
Right. So one line of questioning I've been playing with, and I've been playing with it in a couple of different dimensions, is around the mind and the body. So like the biggest improvement in my coaching in the last 10 years came when I read first The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and then got into polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges. I never managed to get Peter Levine of somatic experiencing on the podcast, but I, read a book of his and watched a bunch of videos. And how much of this has to be body based versus mind, talking based? Because when you watch Peter Levine work with like an Iraqi war vet with a tick, it's all in the body, and there's no thinking whatsoever, practically.
Right.
How do you see the somatic versus the psychological?
It's a really great question. Now, some people approach the somatic like, Deb Dana, who does, polyvagal, kind of takes the polyvagal theory very clinically. It's really about taking care of our system and learning how to regulate our system, which is beautiful. That's very empowering, like to learn like, oh, this is how I take a breath, or this is how I come into safety. But that's a little different than going underneath to find what's pumping that sense of danger through our system in the first place, which are these old learnings. Now, and working with those, but that you can also do somatically. That's what Peter Levine is doing, for instance, because if you are, now somatic experiencing is really great, especially for physical traumas. I know they like to think they do attachment trauma and all the types of trauma, and that's probably largely true, but it's really well designed for physical traumas. So let's say you had a physical trauma. The imprint of that could be, it usually is something like, my body can't protect me. I'm frozen. There can even be an imprint that says like, I'm still in the danger. That it can be an unconscious imprint that is complicated to explain, but it sounds great. Again, but it can, there's a schema, there's a neural network in our brain that can still feel like the danger is happening right now. And I'm frozen and powerless to protect myself. So if you are doing somatic experiencing work and you're tapping into that state, that is bringing that original network online. That's running electricity through that network. When you feel the freeze, you're imagining being the scene again. You're like the freeze that you had, However, if this time it has a different ending, where you're able to move that, organize that into fight energy, maybe push against someone's hands or push against a pillow, or even just imagine fighting back and running and saving yourself. And, then that's a disconfirmation. Now, it didn't really matter that you don't necessarily need all the words of like, oh, can you see here? You took on the belief that you are frozen. And you know what I mean? That is really less important, because in that, if you're activating it, if you're feeling that in your body and the anxiety with it, and like, oh, I'm right there with it, you can be pretty well assured that the electricity is running through that part of your brain that is saying, I'm in danger, I'm powerless, I'm not going to be enough, I can't fight back. And then when you have a new experience right on the heels of that one being activated, that allows you to feel your own power. It's like breaks the illusion of powerlessness. Like I'm pushing, I'm running, I'm feeling it, I'm moving my body, or I'm at least imagining moving my body. Then that is a very powerful disconfirmation and unlocks memory reconsolidation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So one of the other dimensions around the difference between physical and sort of mental, emotional, psychological, and I'm not even sure what words can actually parse what I'm saying. But there's, when I was thinking about like theories of addiction. And so on the one hand, you have, Gabor Mate, who talks like every addict he's ever seen has had a, traumatic childhood or experiences. And then, a year or so ago, I interviewed Anna Lemke, who wrote a book called Dopamine Nation, in which she's talking about the chemicals themselves. And that and especially in the field I've worked around, like food addiction, where is it possible to have like just these chemicals that can cause addictions that are not based on emotional learning or the need for, like, I'm just physically addicted and there's no schema that says I need this.
Probably, because addictive, there is a physiology to addiction as well. So if for some reason you got into something, that you were either using a certain way, however, in actual practice, both are probably always alive. Some, of course, if you're drinking or doing drugs or, there's going to be some biochemical, part that would make it a little bit harder to stop or a lot harder to stop. And even if that were taken off the table, you still might not stop because of an emotional need. It's serving a role. There is some coherent learning or knowing that makes drinking actually a good idea. And the belief is if I drop it, I'll be in worse shape.
Right.
So I imagine in actual practice, it's almost always both. And it is powerful to unlock, be conscious of and unlock the learning that necessitates that. Even again, our conscious personality can hate it, but that is different. That's a different part of the brain. You know?
Right. There's a book, looking on my shelf, called Switch by the Heath brothers, Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And the metaphor that they borrow is the elephant and the rider. And our conscious mind is the rider. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it has some control.
It doesn't matter what the rider wants. If the elephant, wants to trample it. So,
yeah. Right. Occasionally the elephant's open to suggestion.
Right.
But not always. That's right.
So I want if it would be helpful or possible to like kind of examples of like this in practice. Because I'm reading two of Bruce Ecker's books at the same time, and he talks about sort of this this is like a theory-free framework, right? Or a
right.
Technique free. Like any technique that does X will get it, whether it's IFS or coherence or whatever. And so so the important thing is for therapists of all kinds to understand like. This button does this and this button does that, which I think has been absent from psychotherapy, right? Since Freud.
Yes, that is a good point to make. So Bruce Ecker, who we keep mentioning, who wrote the book Unlocking the Emotional Brain, which really explores memory consolidation, he co-developed something called coherence therapy. While he teaches coherence therapy, and it certainly follows these requirements for unlocking memory consolidation, actually his more passionate mission is understanding just the mechanism of memory reconsolidation and therapy so that we can explore how many of these models are already doing things to galvanize memory reconsolidation in different ways, like we just talked about with somatic experiencing, or certainly IFS, or emotion-focused work, or even psychodynamic work that's more experiential in nature. Like all these different experiential therapies, and probably even some non-experiential ones, have bumped into ways of doing this. But if we understand what's going on in the brain, then it's like now we can converse with each other much more easily. We have like this shared understanding, which does make it easier to integrate between theories. I'm trying to think of some examples because I've been doing some really nice integrations. Now I've sort of finally gotten to the place where I can integrate like pretty seamlessly between IFS and like use IFS for getting the schema, or slow down with coherence and use parts work, like really integrate them. And there's just like
maybe could you describe IFS, internal family systems, for just a minute or two, just to give people context?
Yeah. So one way of talking about these, though, in coherence therapy, we would call these emotional learnings. Well, sometimes we call them emotional learnings. Often we call them schemas. That's kind of the more technical word. But another way to think about these neural networks that hold these imprints is as parts of us. Now, technically, the imprint in IFS, they wouldn't say, well, that's not the part of you. It's just there's some part of you that holds that knowing, that has that imprinted on it. Like, let's say, a maybe young wounded part that learned I'm not worthy of love. That's just a deep knowing that can be imprinted. Now, that child is worthy of love. You were worthy of love as a child, but you could say you have somewhere in your brain, you can activate a knowing that I'm not worthy of love, even though other parts of you do know you're worthy of love. See, even then I use the word part. It's really hard not to capture the complexity of this without using parts language, because our brain knows lots of things. You can have an adult identity that's confident and, is kind of spiritual and believes everyone is worthy of love, and that be very true to you. But another neural network, you might say another part, still has this old imprint, remember, because memory reconsolidation hasn't happened yet. It's, a different learning that says, no, I'm not. And associated with it will be what's called a protector part, which is, if that's true, then I better do this to protect myself.
Right.
I better be really grandiose and always feel good about myself and be dominant so that I don't have to feel that shame. Or I better be super pleasing to people so that they'll give me some love because I don't really earn it based on my own value. There's all these kind of ways we additionally learn that also get imprinted. In IFS, we call them protector parts that are like, well, if that's true, then what else is true? How do I need to live in order to stay safe? And that's actually where the urgency around our symptoms comes. Like drinking is they would say that is done by a certain protector part of you that learned I have to drink in order to stay safe, or I have to bully someone in order to stay safe, or I have to be perfectly pleasing in order to stay safe. get my needs met, etc. So it's just another language for saying the same thing, but it's beautiful because when you use parts language, it's really user friendly in therapy to say, gosh, there's a part of you that knows this thing. Not all of you, like some other part of you knows something different, but a part of you feels small, or a part of you doesn't trust people, or a part of you, and then you can really do relationship building with that part. Like you can give it compassion and listen to it and have a conversation with it. And that's a really seamless way of making these underlying learnings conscious.
So is that the compassion and understanding and welcoming and having the part belong, is that the same as disconfirmation?
It can serve as a disconfirmation for sure. But the first way it's used is creating the safety for the deeper mind to speak. Right? It's kind of like the shift that you're making recently from like kind of judging it to like being curious about it. That is the shift. The exact one you were describing is saying, hey, deeper mind, we're going to, instead of speak over you or ignore you or silence you or tell you you're wrong or whatever, we're slowing down, turning toward you, maybe thinking of you as a part of Howie or whatever. So that's kind of respectful. You're a part of Howie, and then we can say, tell us what you're afraid would happen if you let Howie be confident or set a boundary or whatever. Like, what are you afraid would happen? And it's just a way, it's like a nice little, I don't want to call it a trick because it's more profound than that, but it works as a method for letting those deeper imprints like kind of come into consciousness. It's a relational way to do it. If we relate to them as like consciousnesses in themselves versus just like, what could I be thinking? Like, think of that as a part. Do you feel generally compassionate toward it? And can you ask sincerely and with curiosity, what's going through? What did you learn that makes this so important? And what wound is this associated to? That's very like lovely clinically. And there's many therapies that use parts work, but IFS, internal family system, is like the most famous and maybe the most like fully realized. And I do have a YouTube video series on IFS if anyone's curious, as you mentioned. It's a wonderful
put links
model.
to all those in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I guess when you talk to that part with compassion and allow it to speak, particularly, is that when the electricity flows through the neural network to kind of activate it?
Exactly. When it's speaking, it's being witnessed. It is flowing through. And one other thing that's nice about parts work is it allows it to speak without it being overwhelming. Because if you're in a state of overwhelm, memory reconsolidation, like the mismatch won't be detected. That's why we often don't have memory reconsolidation happen when we're really triggered. Even if some new disconfirming thing happens, it's like we have to have actually a little grounding and sense of safety, in order to like notice that the new positive thing that we didn't expect. And so parts work is also really, it accomplishes a lot at the same time. But one of the things it accomplishes is instead of over identifying with that and being like, oh, I really am horrible, or this is so dangerous, which can be so triggering and destabilizing that we get overwhelmed. If we say, okay, part of you believes that, not necessarily all of you, can you relate to that? Then it gives us a little observing space, which is very stabilizing also.
So I'm thinking now through the filter of polyvagal theory, in which you said like if we need to create a safe environment, as a coach or a therapist for the work to happen, and yet it can't be like if they're totally in social engagement. So is there? How do we think about the balance or the container?
I think that's a really lovely question. I think I hear what you're saying. It's like we want to activate these old places, but we also have to stay in social engagement, and it is possible to do that actually, and that is the trick. One of my friends, who's a real neuro geek, Julianne Taylor-Shore, she says, the main trick of being a therapist is how to open those old files, to activate those neural networks and not be overwhelmed and have some observing self, some social engagement with ourselves and with another person and groundedness and all that, stay mindful, all those things, like to be in our window of tolerance, you might say, like, because that is mainly the technique, right? And that's one thing that's nice about parts work or using mindfulness or in somatic experiencing, they do resourcing, they do it more somatically. But how can we bring these things awake and alive, these trauma memories, really, not just the memory of what happened, but the holding of what I learned, like that could be destabilizing to reaccess. But if you do it slowly, if you do it, through parts work or with a lot of support from the therapist or just really staying curious, there's a way to tap into those places without becoming them, without becoming overtaken by them. And that is sort of like a really lovely, again, that's kind of what experiential therapy is all about.
Gotcha. So one final question before I wrap up and let you go. If the container is so important and that balance around, opening without overwhelming, is there a difference the way you think about it in terms of Zoom versus in person, in terms of what what's safe to do?
It is really interesting. I mean, I remember even Stephen Porges, when we were all first doing Zoom, you can't have the subjective, the intersubjective safety, blah, blah, blah over the screen. And I tend to have a more hopeful stance about it. Because so much, we humans are amazing and we're so social. There's so much we can do with our voice and our words and our intention. It's almost like our intention, right? That people can read even over a screen. And that just seems to be the case. That's proven to me because I've been doing these really powerful sessions over a screen, and maybe you have too, However, is that true for every single person? Might that be? Actually, I will say for some people, what I've noticed, it's more safe, weirdly. And for some people, it's less safe because we're all different.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessarily like caps what we can do. Like, never try to do that level of work over Zoom because we're just discovering it's possible.
All right. It brings to mind, I was just reading, I think Lisa Feldman Barrett's book on emotions being constructed. And it's like the brain actually knows nothing. Like everything it knows, it gets, right? It's in a little box. And so whether I'm in front of you or whether you're in Zoom, like my mind is constructing the meaning of that. And it's possible that since 2019, our collective meaning
we have new networks
of being on Zoom is a more social thing than it would have been.
We're learning how to connect. We have now a new map of like, this person is present with me. We have to define our definition of presence beyond physical presence. But I think the brain can do that. And it's really the meaning that makes,
So I'd love to end by inviting you to kind of guide us to how people can find out more, because we've obviously just, scratched the surface. As this conversation has gone on, I kind of feel like in the back of my mind is like, I'm kind of interviewing to be one of your students because I really want to learn this at a deeper level. So, how can people, get this great stuff?
Yeah. Well, for one, Howie, you'd be welcome. If you want to join our group with Bruce that we meet every other week, you're welcome to. I do have a few slots in that. And
it worked. The podcast worked.
Yes, your unconscious, your secret aim was achieved. Because you're on board, you're learning this stuff. So, okay, so that's a great question. If people want to train with me, which I do like a 6-month core training over Zoom, a weekly training group kind of thing. It's just the basics of experiential work. We end up going kind of deep and it gets complex, but I try to keep returning to the simple, here are the basic skills that in any kind of, around creating safety and using, mindfulness, basically internal tracking, how to open that kind of inner awareness. So, people are welcome to email me, Tori Olds at gmail.com.
And somebody just went, wait, repeat that.
Yeah, so Tori Olds is my name, Tori Olds at gmail.com.
OLDS at gmail.com. And again, I'll throw that in the show notes as well.
Sure. And then also I have a website, toriolds.com, where I do have some other courses. I have a course through the Academy of Therapy Wisdom that I think is pretty good, but it's based on just kind of general therapy skills. But Unlocking the Emotional Brain is a great book. And my YouTube channel, because I'm about to put a whole YouTube series about coherence. I already did one on IFS that I recommend. I'm going to be doing one on AADP, which is the dynamic version of experiential work. So I'm going to be putting a lot more content out. So I think my YouTube, if you want free stuff, then the YouTube channel would be a good place.
All right. And so I'll put links to all, and people can get to the YouTube channel from toriolds.com, I believe. Right.
Yep. YouTube.
You must be kicking ass with the YouTube search algorithm, because I found you by accident just looking for videos on internal family systems because I didn't quite understand Dick Schwartz explaining it.
Yeah, I love that. That's my passion, is taking these, because these people are so amazing and brilliant. And so I really want to bring, these incredible ideas out in a very user, like accessible way to non-therapists and therapists. So
right on.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I can't remember an interview that I've looked forward to more for longer, because I'm so hungry for this, and you're so generous and thoughtful and strategic in how you describe it and explain it. Is your music out there too? Music or art?
That means a lot. Yeah. Anything that's music of mine is like 20 years. It's like old music that's on YouTube, but I'll be putting out more for my more recent album. And it's, on my YouTube videos, that is the music that you'll hear. And the beginning and the end is my music.
Okay. So you haven't gotten sued by anyone for royalty infringement.
Myself. Exactly.
The part that made the music is very upset at the part that,
yeah, one part's going to sue the other part. We did not agree to putting this music out there.
Well, I see we're opening a whole can of worms here. All right, Tori, thank you so much. I will definitely be in touch about becoming a student. And thank you so much for taking the time today and for the work you're helping to popularize in the world.